Some people say that going to college and going on in life and doing something different from what one studied in college means that you wasted your college years. Well, I studied criminology, sociology, deviant psychology, abnormal psychology, and I went into show business. That I had in Toronto called the 505 Club, and John was up recruiting the National Lampoon Radio Hour, trying to steal talent from Second City and bring them down to New York. He managed to grab Gilda Radner. I didn't want to go because I was on a children's TV show. I had Second City. I was making more money than the Prime Minister of Canada. Plus, I had my speakeasy. I had walls of cash, literally cash in the walls, from this after-hours illegal booze can called the 505 Club. And the night John came up to recruit for a radio show, we came back to the booze can. We had a party there, and we started to play old blues records. And I had a Downchild blues band. Put them on. He said, "Who's this?" I said, "Well, this is Downchild Blues Band, a local blues band." He said, "You're from Chicago." I said, "John, you should know about the blues." He said, "Well, I'm into Grand Funk and Allman Brothers." I said, "Well, that's all blues." And sort of I reacquainted him with blues, and he reacquainted me with sort of heavy metal. And Howard Shore was in the place that night. He eventually became musical director of Saturday Night Live. And we were saying, "Oh, we should put a band together." And he said, "Yeah, you could call yourself the Blues Brothers." Subsequently, that's what we did.
Belushi was very into heavy metal. He had his headbanging room, and they had a townhouse on 60 Morton Street in the Village in New York, and he had this like padded room, and you'd go in there, and only Michael Jackson, he's the only other person I know who plays music that loud. They'd crank up this, heavy metal stuff, and your fillings would hurt. It was like,
When I was working at Saturday Night Live as an arranger in 1978, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi came back from a weekend in San Francisco, and they had stayed up all night with a fellow named Curtis Salgado listening to blues records. Curtis Salgado was the harmonica player with the Robert Cray Blues Band. On the way back on the airplane, John and Danny came up with the idea of these two characters that later became called the Blues Brothers.
Back then it was just to sort of explore the music, have a little fun with it, make the audience laugh in the warm-ups, pull off our appearances in Saturday Night Live, and kind of come off to sell these characters. But as it evolved, the mission was to reacquaint people or acquaint people for the first time with this tremendous form of American music.
We rehearsed the Saturday Night Live band, and we were hoping to get this routine on the show.
The fact that John and Danny were so popular, they were heroes already with the public.
We wore the suits for a couple of occasions, then we took the act to the show as a warm-up act.
The timing was right. The public was behind these kids from the get-go.
Once we got the show, we started to play around on weekends. We played at the Lone Star Cafe. Our backup bands at one time were like, Willie Nelson's band and Room Full of Blues, Duke Robillard's band. And
we got letters and cards and phone calls, which led to another appearance of the Blues Brothers.
Then we put it on the show with Carrie Fisher's guest host appearance, and with Steve Martin subsequently, and then Steve Martin asked us to open for him at the Universal Amphitheater.
When we looked into the crowd at the beginning of the show, Jack Nicholson, it was like the who's who of Hollywood, all with their dark glasses on.
Nicholson was right in the first seat, and he had his shades on, and I looked over and he caught my eye and lifted up his shades. Lowered his shades, Cool.
No one was prepared for the phenomenal success that the Jake and Elwood suddenly had because they opened for Steve Martin at the Universal Amphitheater, and then an album was made of that. And that album was I think to this day it's the highest selling blues album, which is pretty bizarre.
We came along at a time when there was a real sort of lull and a dip in American music tastes, and the sort of one fad was going out, and people weren't really sure what the next fad was going to be.
It was black music. It was blues and rhythm and blues, and at that time, black music was Nile Rodgers and Chic singing Le Freak. It was all disco.
It was sort of the disco new wave cusp, and in there we kind of were able to slot in and do the song that a lot of people knew, but with a different kind of a twist to it, and with the image associated with who the Blues Brothers were. The album went on to sell 3.5 million copies, and we had a viable sort of entertainment act after that.
Itself had basically been assembled already by Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, and really by Paul Schaefer.
John Belushi and I, we were going to do a handpicked this band 20 years ago.
We started to play with the Saturday Night Live band, and Bones Malone was there, and Paul Schaefer, and Bones said, hey, you know, have you ever heard of Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn? And, well, I hadn't really heard of them, but I knew of the Stax Volt movement in the 60s in Memphis.
A buddy of mine used to call me, and usually if I was in the middle of mixing or overdubbing or something like that, they'd say Steve is busy and he can't come to the phone right now, and I'll leave a message. Well, we had this little thing that he would call, and he would pretend that he was somebody, and he'd say, this is, you know, President Nixon, or this is Stevie Wonder, or this is da-da-da-da-da. And I get this call, and they said, John Belushi's on the phone. And I go, oh, yeah, my buddy. Hey, Alan, what's going on? He said, who? And I said, Alan, this isn't you. And he said, no, this is John Belushi.
One night I got a call long ago from John Belushi. It was about 3 in the morning, and I thought it was a friend of mine putting me on. He said, this is John Belushi. He says, we're going to put this band together. I like your bass playing. Would you come to New York and rehearse? And I hung up. 5 minutes later, he calls back. He said, this is not a joke. It's John Belushi.
Anyway, I told him, I said, well, man, I'll have to get back to you. I just, you know. So in talking to Robin Ford a little bit later, he said, well, who was that? You know, and I said, well, believe it or not, I said, it was John Belushi. And he said, oh, what's going on with that? And I said, well, he wants me to come to New York and start rehearsing for some shows next week. He says, well, you going to do it? And I said, well, I don't know if I can. He said, well, I'll do it. So when my artist said he'd do it, I said, well, we'll try to work something out.
Having them come along, Duck and Steve, because they were real R&B guitar players and real men of soul, it legitimized what we were up to and gave us sort of a whole a purpose and a meaning there, just beyond doing a kind of a comedy act, and we started to revive some of these songs.
It was very important to John Belushi to have a hot lead guitar player. And I just kept saying to him, John, let's get somebody good. He wanted to jump and get that spot in the band filled.
I was swapping licks with Johnny Winter, and this guy named Doc Palmas, I think it was, had told them about me. So they come up and they introduce themselves. My name is John and this is Dan. We are thinking about making an album. Would you like to help us make it? And I said, I would be glad to help you make it.
We saw him playing at a club on Columbus Avenue. He played with James Cotton. I had seen him before. I'd known of his work for many years, and we approached him.
When I was talking to him, and we're supposed to be negotiating, you know, like, so he goes, well, Matt, yes, that's good that you're going to help us. So I think the figure is going to be like $650. I goes, oh no, man, I think that should be more. And he goes, oh no, I'm sorry, I meant $6,500. And I almost fell off the chair. $6,500. Jesus, I couldn't believe that. You know, I didn't think it was going to be near that much, you know.
So the band was pretty much intact, although there was this very political, it's a long, involved story, and there's, like, Rashomon on lots of sides. But Paul was prevented from being in the first movie by unnamed people. But he couldn't be in the first movie.
There was some problems with Paul Schaefer's availability, owing to a contractual dispute with Saturday Night Live and all sorts of difficulties. So he couldn't get out of his contract. And so John Landis had seen this film where I played the piano, and John Belushi knew I played piano, so voila, I was on the plane.
And then Willie Hall, Duck and Steve recommended Willie, and they had knew him from Memphis. They had played a lot with him in Memphis with Isaac Hayes and other stuff.
Some of the people that we hired were in the original Saturday Night Live band, most notably the 3 horn players.
Our friend Lou Delgado from the Saturday Night Live show played the 4th horn part, but there was no 4th horn player in the movie, so that's one of the anomalies of the movie. You're always hearing 4 horns playing, but there's only 3 of us on stage.
The Blues Brothers Band is an amazing group of musicians, and basically it's a Memphis rhythm section with a New York horn section, and the idea of taking that kind of fatback rhythm and putting...
Judy Belushi and John and I come up with the sort of the backstory and the concept of the Blues Brothers to sort of filling in our own conceptions of who they were and where they came from after the first album came out. I remembered all that stuff from Crim and sat down and kind of used it in creating the profile of 2 guys who start out basically in an orphanage and homeless and end up in a life of crime because they never really had a family, and that's a lot of criminals. Most of your criminals have that as an origin.
Danny had said, thinking of all these adventures for the Blues Brothers, they had a big life, and it sounded great, and so we made the deal at Universal Studios, and Danny went away to write.
I really didn't know how to write movies. I didn't know anything. I don't think I'd ever even seen a screenplay. I was told that most screenplays were, 120 to 150 pages long, but when I sat down to write the Blues Brothers, there were so many descriptive passages in there, just paragraphs and paragraphs of shots, of concept, of ideas, of descriptions, and eventually it just kind of ballooned up.
The thing about Dan Aykroyd, he's a marvelous writer, and what he has that's really great are ideas. His conceptions are so strong.
I had the idea that, well, what I'll do here is, since there's no way I could get it all into one movie or one script, I figured, well, I might as well get all of the knowledge that I have about the Blues Brothers, all of the conceptions, John's input, my input, Judy's input, and put it all in one volume, even though it would be prohibitively long. And I figured, devise the method of writing actually 2 scripts at one time.
Dan Aykroyd had written actually a 324-page script that actually had a story for recruiting each member of the band individually. Now that script, which by the way was delivered to me in the covers of the Valley Yellow Pages, because it was as big as a phone book, so I think Dan Aykroyd tried to take a little of the sting out with a little humor, actually making it look like a phone book.
Dan Aykroyd had really written an incredible tome about these 2 guys, and John then took it and edited it and tried to make it into a screenplay form, which was actually something that he could shoot.
I thought, there's no way to shoot this. It was pretty incoherent, but it had great ideas and epic characters and a real respect for the music, and it was pretty, it was big. It was big.
When I handed it in, I didn't know what Landis was going to do with it or how he's going to manage it down, but he was an accomplished filmmaker. He had written scripts before, and he was able to take it and distill it down to an actual form of screenplay at 120 pages.
We started shooting before we had a finished screenplay, really.
From singing it and playing it, I think we viewed all of it as being able to be relatively easily transmitted out there to the audience.
The songs were chosen by Danny and me and John, and it's just what we liked or what was interesting or what was appropriate to the scene.
I remember going down to his apartment down in the Village where he and Judy lived, and this is during the period where he was selecting music. And he had this incredible shelf of 45s, and he put something on for about 4 measures. Snap it, put another one on, listen to it. Now he'd throw it on the floor and stomp on it. It was like Blutarsky in Animal House. I said, what are you wasting it? Or give them away to somebody. He said, I hate this crap. And personally, I wasn't a big fan of this music all along. I mean, when it's good, any music is great, when it's really good. But I learned to appreciate it by being exposed to it through these guys. John really knew this stuff, and so did Danny.
If the music didn't work, throw it out. They didn't care, we'd rehearse it 3 times, boom, out, If it wasn't fun, we didn't do it.
It's always frustrated me that many people don't consider the movie a musical, which makes me nuts, because it has more music than most musicals.
He said, because to him it's a musical. He says it's almost nonstop music. There's always music in the background. There's all these musical numbers. And he really felt that he was directing a musical. That's the way he looked at it.
I have a great love for the classic Hollywood musical. Musical comedy is an American theatrical form that was, it's ours.
I knew the action part of it, but to me, loving old Hollywood and old Hollywood musicals, that's what I kept visualizing.
It's almost like a camouflaged musical. Musical usually means that main characters break into song to express emotion, and that doesn't happen in this.
It was a new kind of musical. It was it was catching rhythms of life in the city and the times.
The musical numbers in the movie were kind of the crown jewels of the piece. The shoe leather that got you from one musical number to another was something that we always tried to keep to a minimum so that we could get into the great musical numbers that were the set pieces, if you will, in the movie.
There was an attempt to do every kind of performance. By that I mean like operetta, traditional musical comedy, which is an American form, where people are talking and then...
When we shot the outside of Ray's Music Exchange with the hundreds of people in the streets dancing, it was freezing cold. I mean, freezing, and yet the sequence takes place in the summer. So we had all these poor dancers out there wearing short-sleeve shirts and things dancing away, and it was like 25 degrees.
Essentially, all of the moves in the movie are Carlton's, and some of the moves that we used subsequently in the act when we went on tour were Carlton's. And as I do, Everybody Needs Somebody Loves Today and Soul Man, we still do some of the moves that Carlton taught us, today.
Then it came about, we wanted Aretha Franklin, we wanted John Lee Hooker, we wanted Ray Charles, we wanted James Brown. And fortunately for us, but unfortunately at the time, except for Ray Charles, most of these people weren't working. So it was easy to get them. You called up and said, hey, you want a job? They went, please. So that was not the hard part.
It was great. We were getting to work with our heroes. And it was fantastic to be going to the likes of Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles and James Brown to ask them to participate. And no one had really done anything like this before. So it was really very exciting for all of us.
There are certain singers, B.B. King, Aretha Franklin, who have trouble with lip sync and to playback. And the reason for that is interesting. It's because they never sing a song the same way twice. So it's quite great if you're seeing them live, but if you're trying to shoot them to playback, it's a huge pain in the ass, because it's like, what is your mouth doing?
The only problem that you have editing musical numbers is, do performers do it the same way, take after take? And can they lip sync their dialogue, their song, especially if they're the ones that have made the song famous?
Most famous private security police force in the country. And we had hired them to guard, because we had millions of dollars of merchandise in there. And we made a deal with a lot of suppliers. Anything we didn't break, we didn't have to pay for, So we had guards there, and things were being stolen. And finally called the police, and it turned out the guards were doing the stealing.
We had to get guards to watch the guards.
And background action, enjoying yourself,
And in the mall, all those stunt guys weren't drivers. All those stunt guys were everyone on foot in the mall. Are stunt people. So that's where the huge numbers came in,
I do remember that Danny Aykroyd thought that shooting at that mall was just one of the greatest things he'd ever seen. That he'd thought this up, and here it was. This bizarre car chase combining, consumer goods and police cars, and his own mall. And I'll never forget just the sheer delight that this, idea he'd had late one night was now being played out in a very big way.
Part of the joke of the first Blues Brothers is size. Everything's gigantic. Everything's exaggerated to such a huge extent. So it was interesting. People were going, well, car crash, song. Gee, that doesn't compute.
I just couldn't describe events without getting in trouble and without people looking at me like, what have you got us into?
Yeah, well, we did run over, but the footage is going to be excellent. I tell you, it's movie history. I know. No, I think in this sequence we're going to be 2 days over. It'll all be on the screen, I promise. Okay, I'll see you in LA.
Obviously, you one couldn't duplicate the first movie. It would cost too much. It cost $27 million then, which is much more than what we got now, actually. But that was a huge amount then. That was probably like 60 now. And we did this epic. we had 34 cars going 110 miles an hour in downtown Chicago. I don't think you could do that again.
You may have heard that Daly Mrs. Mayor Daly had come up with an edict that there would be no filming in Chicago. He wasn't going to allow it.
Partly because of an old M Squad episode with Lee Marvin, where it showed a Chicago cop accepting a bribe. And Mayor Daly, that's it.
One of the big issues, of course, given what we were planning, was how would we get permission to get the city of Chicago to let us film all of this?
We met with Mayor Jane Byrne. We had met with her to say how happy we were to be shooting in Chicago and so forth. And she asked, was there anything that she could do for us?
It was so Chicago, Mayor Byrne was very instrumental. And then other people, high-placed, these kind of people, helped us too, because, for instance, shooting in Daley Plaza, the Cook County board said, no. So we went above them, to the people who owned the Cook County board. This is no longer true in Chicago. And we were able. But it was amazing, the cooperation we got from the city and from the police.
Good news. The mayor of Chicago is going to allow us to take over Daley Plaza and drive the Bluesmobile through the lobby of the state office building. Good news, we got the permission. Bad news, we got the permission.
I think they got what they want. It worked pretty slick, yeah.
Oh, it worked terrific. They stopped good. Brakes worked real good. How'd it look?
Looked terrific.
Oh, I couldn't see it. I had my eyes closed.
Well, the first thing I thought about was the Sam Fuller movies. I thought I was going to be making this great war movie. It got me into that's what went into my mind. I saw it as a battle sequence. And it really excited me because we had the tanks, we had the army, we had so much stuff going on.
We'd have conversations. How many ISPs, Illinois State Police cars? Well, we got like 60 ISPs and 42 Chicago City cop cars and 17 ambulances.
150 National Guardsmen, 60 Chicago cops.
350 guns, there's 150 batons.
4 Sherman tanks, 3 helicopters.
700 pounds of prime rib.
And 400 troops. Okay, 400 troops. Well, if we got the 400 troops, then what about the SWAT team?
John Landis directed this movie as General Westmoreland might prepare a battle.
Come on, man! Screaming! Hustle! 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 Get those weapons ready, mister!
We had a place called the War Room, and in the War Room were maps of Chicago and aerial views, and this is where all the planning was done. If you're going to tie off major sections of Lower Wacker Drive or Lakeshore Drive, these things had to be carefully coordinated, and together with the assistant directors and the Chicago Police and Fire Departments, we staged some very, very big gags. From a logistics standpoint, I think the hardest number was the Cab Calloway number, which was a giant, live, large concert that we actually shot here in Hollywood at the Palladium. And there were thousands of extras, in fact, so many that we had promoted the audience through a local radio station. And in between the setups, we're entertaining them with local disc jockeys and giving away prizes and so forth. And there were wardrobe changes and lighting effects and so on. I think that was logistically, as far as anything inside was concerned, was the most difficult.
Movie. It's about Chicago. It's about music.
That's about 2 hours.
There's no sex and no drugs in the movie.
I had actually a funny story happen with John that I've told before, but it wasn't funny at the time. But we were having quite a big fight. We were over here at Universal shooting the interior of the church on stage 29, and it involved drugs. And I was extremely angry about this cocaine, and I'd thrown away a bunch of cocaine, and John was furious, and we had a big fight. We went out on Lancashire. So there's Jake Blue. He's in drag, and I'm out there, and we're yelling. I mean, we're really mad, and we're having an argument. And he finally said, well, fuck this and fuck you and like that. And he sort of sticks his thumb out. I mean, I don't even... But this car coming the opposite way goes, makes a huge U-turn. It's convertible. And there's this kid, real stoner, goes, hey, John Belushi, man! And John jumps in the front and says, take me to the Chateau Marmont. You know, off, gone. Like that. At the time, it was not amusing. But in retrospect, it's pretty funny.
Over there is Alan Rubin. Over that side. That way. Alan Rubin.
Hi, how are you? We all know that John has a bad boy, but a giving, wonderful soul. You go to his house and open his refrigerator like he would do it in your house, you know. You felt like you were at your friend's, and he would kill for his friends.
John was the type of person that if he decided you were his friend, then he more or less looked after you from then on. And he was quite a faithful friend to me.
The guys are always partying and stuff. I was, and still am, sort of like a loner, you know. But whenever he saw me sitting over in the corner anywhere, he'd always come over and says, Matt. He says, what's the matter? He says, are you okay?
He was a serious individual, but he was always clowning around, you know, and that was kind of about the basic of it, you know. And he was just a great guy, and we hung out. He'd come by the house, you know, and sit there and clean out my refrigerator. When he run out of food, he'd go somewhere else, you know. But no, he was just a super guy, a very, very giving guy, and it was a lot of fun. And
he's also a person who might show up at your house at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I loved him very much and still miss him.
John was kind of, like I say, you wanted him as your next door neighbor. You want to hug him.
John was a wonderful person. I mean, I adored him. And in fact, everybody adored John Belushi.
This is Mr. John Belushi and Mr. Dan Aykroyd. Mr. Dan Polaroid. I've been calling him everything like. Now, just a minute. I'll get you in a few minutes. You stay back till I call you. Now, I've compared these people, and I may have to swallow all of this. You understand? I may, because I'm figuring on them to take their places. We'll just say this, Abbott and Costello, Hope and Crosby, and Martin and Lewis, and Sinatra and his little group and everything like that, but they couldn't carry these guys jockstrap. You know what I mean?
One night, nobody could find John. We didn't know where he was. We needed him for a shot. And someone said, well, I saw him walking over across the street. He crossed the street and went into that neighborhood over there. So we began to look for him, and we went to a house in the neighborhood, sort of basically, you know, looking for telltale signs of him. And someone said, oh, yeah, he went into that house there. We knocked on the door, and the guy came to the door, and he said, yes, Mr. Belushi's in. He's in on the couch. He's asleep. Perfect stranger. Turned out John had walked off the set, gone to somebody's house, knocked on the door, said, you know who I am, John Belushi. I'm tired, I'm hungry. He walked into the guy's fridge, opened the fridge, stood there at the fridge, the guy said, basically made himself a sandwich, had a glass of milk, you know, and then said, can I crash out on your couch? Perfect stranger crashed out on the couch. So John really was America's guest, and that really crystallized it, you know. That was really a funny night.
Wherever I go all over the world, people love that movie, and these things take on a life of their own.
I would have never imagined that 17 years later I would still be playing with the same guys.
Dan Aykroyd has helped blues probably more than anybody, and John Belushi if he hadn't died. I think from that first movie, there was some criticism given to John and Danny, but they've done more for blues than anybody in the last 20 years.
Dan Aykroyd's passion for rhythm and blues and basically black American music, one of the things the movie did quite successfully was draw attention back to these great artists. And you talk to James Brown or Aretha Franklin or any of these people, and they'll tell you their careers were revitalized, you know, and I'm proud of that. You know, I really am proud of that.
It broadened my audience, and it certainly introduced people to me who were not aware of who I was.
As soon as I got with the Blues Brothers band, and we did the Blues Brothers movie, one, I couldn't believe how I was accelerated, man.
I just knew we were making a great movie. In my heart, I knew. And even though maybe the reviews weren't great, and people said it wasn't going to do well, I knew it was going to last forever.
I know the fans are there. There's, without question, the fans are there. And they go crazy when we go open a House of Blues, and there's 2,000 people, and they're all going nuts. I mean, they love this band.
My wife and I were at Epcot Center, and it was about 11 o'clock at night. It was getting kind of dark. And this guy goes, man, Murphy Dunn, man. It's me and it's Murphy. Is that you? And I said, yeah. What are you gonna do? He said, oh no, I'm not gonna. Can I touch you? I said, yeah. It's okay. Hi, how are you? Yeah, it just knocks me out when it happens.
It's funny though. This one appearance, when I hold up that prophylactic, I'm telling you, it's weird. People still talk to me about it to this day, and they say cracked them up.
Every now and again, even on the street or somewhere, say, "Hey, it's the Penguin," which is great fun.
The movie is very much like Dragnet, you know. Jack Webb, very straightforward. Thank you, ma'am. Yep.
Certainly something. I did something right because people love these characters, and they're wonderful things in the movie.
I'm one of his biggest fans. I think he's one of the great filmmakers of our age. He certainly made some of the best pictures of our time.
He's a great director. He's like a directing animal. It's like an animal. If there was an animal called a director, it would be John Landis.
Take a good look at these two kids because you're going to see a lot of them, and they're going to say, here they come, and none of them go. They come on like we the people and go off like gangbusters.
Shotgun written, ladies. God bless you, sir. Shotgun written.
This production is happy people. I have very professional people and very alert people.
Sean Daniel, Vice President of Universal Pictures and a hell of a good guy.
But not for long.
Bob, come here. Look at this. Robert K. Weiss of Robert K. Weiss Presents, the producer of the motion picture. Thank you, Bob. Cut. I've got to clean up. When in Hollywood, visit Universal Studios.